Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for this webinar on PPP Part 2. For many of us, the first round of PPP was not particularly successful, and so many of us were left out of the process. And so we thought it would be important to host a webinar to talk about the new round of funding so that you could have an idea of what is about to happen. What you should know is the following, is we're not experts. And what we're going to be doing is giving you some advice, but the most important piece of advice I can give you is talk to your bank, because this is really all up to your bank and whether or not you will be able to get into it. And if you don't have a bank, or if your bank has stopped taking PPP loans, then you have to move really quickly, because I believe that this money is going to probably run out as fast, if not faster, than the last time. And I'm hoping that it will be open more for the little guy. As you may have read, some of us, including NMAC, did not have a good first experience for this. When we first tried doing it, our bank, Capital One, was not even accepting applications. That has since changed, and so we have our fingers crossed that hopefully we will be considered this time. But it is very frustrating, because this is the money that, for particularly nonprofits, can make a huge difference between who survives and who has to go out of business. So thank you for joining us. What I want to do today is a couple of things. First, I want to say that this is a webinar that is being put together by the Partnership to End HIV, STDs, and Hepatitis. That includes AIDS United, the NASDAD, NCSD, NMAC, and the AIDS Institute. And that we are all here, and we formed this partnership about 3 years ago. And one of the things that we did in this partnership was we brought on a lobbying firm, but we'll be talking about more of that later. The first thing we want to do is do a little bit of technical assistance. If you can look to the right of your computer screen, it says Go to Webinar Control Panel. In the Go to Webinar Control Panel, about midway down, there is a little pyramid next to questions. If you can make sure that that pyramid is pointing down, what we'd like you to do is put your name and your agency and your city as a way to start being comfortable using this support, and for us to know who's on the webinar. And so Chip, who's on the webinar? Come on, people, don't be shy.
Oh, Paul, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So, sorry, I just have a little audio issue. So we have Erica Lessam from Treatment Action Group in New York. We have Stacy Walls from the LGBT Life Center. We have Yvette. Let's see. Still waiting for some more people to check in. Jose Joaquin Willinelli, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering anybody's name. Jose is from COI Incorporated in San Juan.
Rico.
Let's see, who else do we have here? We got a lot of people on.
Good. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. If you have any questions, that will be the place that you need to put it. We will also be in the chat section leaving information. What you should know is that this webinar will go on our webpage. It is being recorded so that you'll be able to come back and look at it at a later date. In fact, all of our webinars are on our webpage. In addition to the webinars, we will also be posting the slide presentation from Brownstein so that you'll have another resource to look at. But before we do this, I want to introduce everybody. Now, Stephen, how long has it been now? How long have you been the ED there?
Let's see, 2.5 months.
You know,
and I haven't made my 90 days yet.
I have to tell you, I cannot imagine what it's like to start as an ED in the middle of all of this. And so just please know how happy we are that you are there, and we welcome you. And so how are things at NASDAQ, and what should we know?
Thanks, Paul. Thank you for the gracious introduction, and welcome everyone to the webinar. Can you guys hear me? Yep, thanks. First of all, I just want to say, NASTAD has been an active member of the partnership, and a lot of what we've been doing in the past few weeks is really trying to advance some of the priorities of the partnership. So, the ending the HIV epidemic, despite the fact that we're in the middle of a COVID-19 pandemic, we haven't stopped engaging around ending the HIV epidemic, and we continue with our partners at Brownstein and with the policy folks within all of our organizations to push the ending HIV epidemic agenda. We're also very keenly aware of, as we're talking about now, the phase 3.5 of the COVID response, but we're also keenly aware of phase 4. And so we are actively engaged in also ensuring that the priorities of the partnership and the priorities of the public health infrastructure in general is incorporated and including in the thinking for phase 4. And then the final thing I would just mention is that we continue to provide support to our members. The COVID-19 hasn't stopped the need for testing people for HIV. It hasn't stopped the need for ensuring that people who are living with HIV have access to care and treatment services, have access to medications, have access to social services and other community programs. And so we have continued to support our members to ensure that those services are continuing unaffected and unabridged. So with that, let me hand it over to our colleagues at Brownstein so we can get started with actually the reason why folks are actually on this call. So David, I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thank you, Stephen and Paul, both for that great introduction. And you pretty much covered it. We've been working very closely with the partnership for a little over 3 years now. And in working with them, have identified the top line most important appropriations priorities to ending these epidemics, and have been working very much on the appropriations front, both on Capitol Hill as well as with the administration, and have had some really solid wins over the course of these few years. And we continue to push for those same priorities. However, obviously, we're in a very different situation at this point, looking at the impacts of COVID-19 and then the federal responses to the pandemic as it unfolds. So we've been very much focused on the various programs that can help and benefit those within the partnership and the programs that they support and they advocate on. And I'm joined here with my colleague, Matt, who is part of the team at our firm that has been very much in the weeds on the PPP program and the SBA program that have been set up essentially to help small businesses as well as nonprofits to weather this storm through loans, both forgivable and otherwise. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to him. He'll give us a brief overview of what they look like, and then hopefully we can answer some questions. So with that, I'll kick it over to my colleague, Matt.
Good deal. Thanks, David. So yeah, as David was saying, my name is Matt Kissick. I'm an attorney at Brownstein, and I am on what we are calling our SBA Rapid Response Team. Our firm has assembled a group of people from across the country, all different levels within the firm, who are working with our DC insiders, people like David, who not only know what's going on the Capitol, but are also intimately plugged into the bill itself. We had a little bit of influence on how some of that language was crafted, and they are continuing to educate us on that shifting landscape, and so we can educate you guys. And as you can imagine, I'd just like to say that being in Las Vegas, I mean, this pandemic has just devastated our city. Our economy has come to a virtual standstill, and it has been very rewarding for me to be able to walk businesses and nonprofits such as yourself through this act and to teach you guys about the different ways that this act can benefit you and keep your businesses afloat during this incredibly unsettling time. And I'd also just like to point out that our mayor has been making the news these days, and she does not speak for all Las Vegans. But with that, let's go ahead and get started here. So the CARES Act. So there's several different provisions that that you can take advantage of as employers. Principally, there's the PPP loans, so the Paycheck Protection Program, which I'm sure is what most of you are here today to learn about. It's a great program. You know, you can get up to $20 million, or sorry, $10 million. Excuse me, and which can be fully refundable if you use the funds as you're supposed to. In addition to that, there are economic injury disaster loans, which allow you to get a maximum of a $2 million loan and up to $10,000 immediately deposited in your business within 3 days. So that's another great program as well. In addition to the different loans, there are a couple of different tax programs that you can take advantage of. And all employers are allowed to defer their employer contributions to Social Security taxes for the remainder of the year. You defer those and basically pay half of it next year and the other half the following year. There's also an employee retention tax credit that provides a fully refundable tax credit to employers who retain their employees. And then there's also a paid leave tax credit, which allows another tax credit to employers based on the paid leave, the sick leave that they give their employees. And then lastly, there are unemployment benefits that are included in the CARES Act, some of which expanded certain other provisions, and other provisions was added new unemployment benefits to employees that unfortunately can't stay on board. So let's dive into the PPP. So as Paul was saying earlier, we anticipate that this new round of funding, there was $310 billion approved on Tuesday in the Senate, and it's getting kicked over to the House right now, which they are intending to either approve today or possibly tomorrow. And those funds will become quickly available either Saturday or on Monday, depending on how the banks are operating. It is a first come, first served basis, as I'm sure many of you already know after the first round. So we highly recommend getting in the queue as quickly as possible. Like Paul was saying, talk to your bank, maintain communication with them. That will be critical because we do anticipate that those funds will get exhausted rather quickly. I mean, it only took 2 weeks for the first round of funding to get exhausted, and we think that it will get exhausted at least that quickly this time around, probably more, just because of the traction that the PPP has gotten in the media. More people know about it, more people have had time to get their documentation together for it. Eligibility for a PPP loan is based generally on the size of the business. So if you have 500 or fewer employees residing in the US, you will generally be eligible. There's a couple other different metrics that the SBA uses to determine eligibility. They use what's called a NAICS table. Some of you may have maybe seen that. It's the North American Industry Classification System. So there's that 500 number might shift a little bit based on the industry. And then there's also another way that they do it based on revenue, on annual revenue. So if you don't meet that 500 number, there might be other ways we can establish eligibility. And then, of course, the reason you guys are all on the call today is that now nonprofits are eligible for this program, which is fantastic. In addition to that, veterans organizations, tribal businesses, and even self-employed individuals are now eligible for this program. So it's helping all sorts of different entities and businesses of all walks of life. So the size of the loan that you're eligible for will be based on your payroll costs. Essentially, the maximum loan amount you can get is 2.5 times your average monthly payroll. And that's determined on the preceding 12 months for when the loan is dispersed. It includes, the payroll costs include pretty much all forms of compensation, whether they're wages, salaries, commissions, any form of compensation really. It is capped at $100,000 per employee. So any employee that makes over that, you just cap at $100,000 and use that as their yearly compensation for terms of calculating that average monthly payroll cost. That also includes benefits, healthcare benefits, retirement benefits, and state and local taxes. It does not include the employer paid federal taxes. And importantly, independent contractors are not factored into this size calculation. They are technically not employees, and now that they are eligible on their own through the PPP loans, they can apply on their own. Now, if you weren't in business last year for the whole 12 months, there are other windows of time that the SBA can use to determine your average monthly payroll. But generally, we're advising clients to bring in all of their payroll documentation from January 1st of last year to now, if you have it. As long as you are in operation as of February 15th of this year, you will be eligible. So there are certain affiliation rules to be aware of. The SBA uses various different affiliation rules to determine if you are in fact a small business. If your business is owned, if more than half of it is owned by a larger entity, the SBA will consider the metrics of the larger entity as being a part of the applicant, which might bump you out of that 500 employee threshold. It's based on ownership and or control, which probably doesn't apply to many people on the call today, but I mean, things like being able to prevent a quorum from happening or controlling a voting block for the board of directors or shareholders would amount to an affiliation. And then the SBA will essentially take the applicant and its affiliates as one entity. So that's just important to keep in mind. It does appear to only apply to one level up, not several levels up in the corporate hierarchy, in the corporate structuring. And then there's some of these, again, this probably isn't very applicable to you guys, but those affiliation rules are waived for certain industries, such as franchise restaurants, franchises, and hospitality. Now, the application doesn't actually ask you about affiliates. They just ask you this, what you see on the screen here, question 3. And if yes, if there are other businesses that have ownership of the applicant, they will ask that you provide a list of those. And then in addition to that, that requires you to provide a list of all of the owners who have a 20% equity stake in the applicant's business. And you provide that on a separate sheet. Now, some banks, and they're doing this at the direction of the SBA, and so we've kind of just recommended it across the board for a lot of applicants, is to be able to provide documentation that proves up at least 51% ownership of the applicant. It kind of just makes the government's job easy. Like I was just saying, if more than half of the business is owned by another entity, that will be an affiliate. So if you can prove up over half of the ownership of the applicant, it kind of just does away with that other affiliation consideration, and they'll just approve your application much quicker. And now it's also important to keep in mind that the SBA and Treasury have made it abundantly clear that it is on the borrower to determine their eligibility. Part of the reason that this program was able to be so expeditiously, rolled out was that it essentially shifted the burden of proving up eligibility from the lenders to the borrowers. So where the banks were originally the party that would determine eligibility, do the affiliation stuff, run all those calculations, now it's on you as the borrower to do that. Which brings me to the point that you will be making several certifications in your application. And you must know that making those certifications is technically under penalty of perjury. So if you do submit false information, it's important to correct that, but submitting false information does technically open you up to some liability based on fraud or the False Claims Act. Now, I don't want to scare anybody with this. I just want to mention it. If you are unsure if you're providing accurate information, as long as you're providing a good faith, reasonable attempt to provide factual information, it's probably not going to be fraud. I mean, fraud really means that you're intentionally trying to deceive the SBA. So if you're just unsure about something, I mean, that's really not fraud. So just do your best in filling out the paperwork, be transparent and forthcoming, and you should be fine. Now, how do you ensure forgiveness? The whole benefit of this entire program. It's all about how you use the money. So the money that you're given is meant to be used to maintain your payroll, obviously, as the name suggests. You can use up to 75% of that, at least 75% of it, it has to be used on payroll, and up to leaving the remaining 25% can be used on other costs, non-payroll costs, including your rent, your mortgage, and your utilities. As long as you stay within those thresholds, you will be entitled to the maximum forgiveness, assuming, of course, that you don't reduce your workforce. If you lay people off or reduce their salaries, your forgiveness will be reduced proportionally. How much it will be reduced is somewhat of an unsettled question right now. We're actually waiting on more guidance from the SBA on exactly how they're going to calculate that. It looks like it will be a sort of a proportional reduction based on your reduction in full-time equivalent employees over the 8 weeks that the loan is meant to cover. But again, we'll have to wait on further guidance from that. And importantly, you have until June 30th to bring those workforce levels back up to pre-pandemic operations. So if you've already laid people off, as long as you bring them back on by June 30th, you'll still be entitled to the full forgiveness. So if it's not forgiven, what are the terms of the loan? It's a 2-year maturity with 1% interest, so it's still very cheap money. You can defer those interest payments for 6 months. And you, again, many of you already know, you apply for this loan through your bank. So it's all, the lenders are very much involved in this whole process. And some banks are asking for additional requirements to be met. You know, they kind of have been changing some of that as they go. Many of you probably heard of how Bank of America a couple of weeks ago was only issuing these PPP loans to business clients that had a line of credit with them. So that they've been doing things like that, which, you know, there was a lot of backlash. So I'm hoping that banks won't be, you know, increasing the showing that you have to make to be eligible for these types of loans, but they are involved in the process. So, but without a doubt, bring in all of your documentation related to payroll, at least going back to January 1 of last year. And now the bottom half of this slide is very important. Essentially, what's going to happen is a few months from now, after you've been given your money and you've used it, you're going to be applying for forgiveness later on. The forgiveness aspect of this isn't just built into the process. So later on, you'll apply for forgiveness, and through that application process, the SBA is essentially going to be conducting an audit of how you use that money. So being able to account for every penny that you got is very important. If you can keep it in a separate account, that's just better. It will be cleaner to show how you use those funds, where they went, whether or not they were used for those authorized purposes that we were just talking about, your payroll costs and your rent and utilities. And as long as you do that, you should be absolutely fine. And then lastly, I don't think it's going to be an issue for anybody here, but you should know that by receiving this public money, these federal dollars, that your name will become public information as well, which, you know, I don't anticipate any kind of PR backlash for anybody on this call, but for other entities that have received some of these small business loans that maybe aren't such a small business after all, that has been an issue for some. A couple of days ago, Shake Shack just gave back their their maximum $10 million loan to the SBA after they were essentially shamed for receiving it in the first place. Now, in addition to the PPP loans, there are the economic injury disaster loans. And these are meant to be a quick cash injection into your operation. Again, the maximum loan amount is $2 million. You can get $10,000 of that within 3 days of applying. And you don't have to go through your bank. You apply directly with the SBA. I believe you can just do it on their website right now, in fact. And the showing to get one of these loans is much less. You don't have to provide all your payroll documentation over the past 12 months. You just have to certify that you have suffered a substantial economic injury, which will not be difficult to make. I mean, I would argue that pretty much all of us have suffered a substantial economic injury at this point. And it's very flexible on how you use those monies. You can essentially do it on spend it on anything you want, assuming, of course, it is to maintain your operation. It's not the time to get one of these loans and then go acquire another business. Not the time for that. But it's cheap money. It's for nonprofits, the interest rate is 2.75%, and the loan term is up to 30 years. The $10,000 advance can be forgivable, and if you got an EIDL loan before April 3rd, that can actually get rolled into a PPP loan going forward. So that's very helpful. And then also, there's no personal guarantee for these loans. It's based entirely on a credit check. So again, very easy to obtain one of these. In addition to the loans, there are several tax programs. As I mentioned, there's the Payroll Tax Deferral, which all employers can take advantage of this right now. There's no strict eligibility requirements that have to be met for this. All employers are allowed to defer their employer portion of the Social Security taxes through the remainder of the year. It's interest free. And again, basically that deferment amount, half of it will be paid next year, the other half the year after that. Employers who receive a PPP loan can also defer their payroll taxes until the loan gets forgiven. And this program was really meant to work in conjunction with the next tax program I'm going to talk about, which is the Employee Retention Tax Credit, which is a great option for people who don't necessarily need a loan now, and they can take advantage of this, because importantly, you cannot get a PPP loan and also rely on the Employee Retention Tax Credit. It's one or the other. You can't have them both. So if you can hold off, if you don't need immediate cash now, and you can wait to get benefit of this later on, it's a great option. And if you don't get a loan, if you can, if the funds get exhausted before your time in line is up, then I would highly recommend going this route. And so employers that are eligible are those that were partially or fully suspended from operating as a direct result of COVID-19, all those non-essential businesses out there. Or if your gross receipts have dropped by 50% compared to the same quarter last year. And so I'm sure many of us are in that boat, even if we weren't closed down directly. And you remain eligible up until your revenues get up to 80% of what they were in the same quarter last year. The amount of the tax credit is half of the qualified wages that you pay eligible employees per quarter, which is capped at $10,000. So it's essentially a $5,000 tax credit per employee per quarter. And this tax credit is fully refundable, which is nice. If your tax credits in the aggregate are more than what you owe, the IRS will cut you a check directly, which is always nice. Get a check from the government. And there's the paid leave tax credit. So employers that are eligible for this are those that have fewer than 500 employees, measured at the time the leave is taken. And essentially this entitles employers to a $5,110 tax credit per employee for the employees that take 2 weeks of leave, paid leave, if they got sick, if they're under a quarantine order, or a healthcare provider told them to stay home, or if they are in fact sick with COVID-19. During that 2 weeks that they're at home, they are entitled to the regular wage or rate of pay. And if they are taking care of somebody else who is sick, the maximum that the employer is entitled to for the tax credit is $2,000 per employee. And that employee is also entitled to 2/3 of their regular wage or rate of pay. And lastly, there are the unemployment benefits for those that unfortunately can't stay on board. There's the federal pandemic unemployment assistance, which expanded the pool of those that are eligible for unemployment altogether. It includes several categories that were not traditionally eligible, to like self-employed individuals, independent contractors, those types of things. There's also been an extension of how the state unemployment benefits apply. There's been an extension for another 39 weeks. And there's been a federal bump in the amount that unemployed people are entitled to, and an additional $600 per week. So that can really help out a lot of folks as well. And then, of course, it's important to remember that if you do receive a PPP loan and those employees do come back on board, they are no longer, in fact, unemployed. There's been a couple of instances of employers that have kind of been in that boat, gotten a PPP loan, and then their employees still trying to collect unemployment, which obviously that's not how the program is meant to work. So that's all I have. So I will go ahead and open it up to you guys for questions.
Great. Thank you all so much for joining us. And thank you so much for that presentation. Part of why I think it was so important was because it gave people alternatives. As we are looking forward to maybe not getting into the PPP program, but there are other venues. And so it is important for all of us to be able to aware of all of our options. But the second thing, and probably more importantly, is these are tough times. These are really, really, really tough times. And unfortunately, this is probably, you know, an important lifesaver for many organizations, and too many small businesses and nonprofits who don't get it may have to close their doors. And so I really encourage you to work with your banks. Now, the challenge is that historically we know that banks have discriminated against a lot of people, particularly people of color, particularly people in the LGBTQ community, particularly a lot of the communities that we represent. And so it is going to be an uphill battle. I'm not going to lie to you and pretend like this is going to be easy. I was reading an article today that talked about how the concierge customers of Citibank got personalized calls from the corporate wealth division to talk to them about how they could apply and get at the front of the queue. And for the rest of us, we have to fight it out like we always have to fight it out. And so we wanted to just make sure that you had as much information as possible. Final thing I just want to say is that we are not experts necessarily in this, and you need to speak with your bank. Your bank is going to be the final place that will be making determinations. And this is not something, and so if you read it if you heard it in this webinar, and then you go to your bank and your bank says, no, that's not how it is, it's probably better to listen to your bank, because this money's going to go fast, and if you are not in the queue in a timely fashion, then you won't be eligible. So now it's time for questions. And what I'd like you to do is go to the question section of the GoToWebinar control panel, and you can write a question. And if you could put your name in, it would be great. But while we're waiting for the first question to come up, let me just ask David to talk a little bit about the fourth stimulus package that we think will be following up the third stimulus package that's about to be approved.
Right. Thank you. And yes, so obviously, I think you saw on the presentation, the Senate passed the most recent tranche. The House is going through the process of voting as we speak for the package that is recapitalizing the PPP program, as well as sending some additional funds to hospitals. There is going to be another stimulus package that will likely start to come together after the House and the Senate come back into session. That's planned. Right now, the plans are for them to be coming back May 4th. So we'll likely not see the bones and meat of that come together until the middle or end of next month at the earliest. And that will likely be another recapitalization of some of the existing programs, as well as, you know, some additional funds going to hospitals, healthcare workers, and states and localities. Again, that's kind of where the pinch point is at this point between Democrats and Republicans, is exactly what that's going to look like. And I think a lot will be learned over the course of the next few weeks, and we'll see where we are in terms of the you know, solubility of the current programs, as well as, of course, looking at the healthcare aspects of the pandemic itself. So that's kind of what we're looking at this point.
David, do you think that there is a possibility that there will be another funding of the PPP, or is this probably the last round?
You know, I think that's also up in the air, and Matt may be able to speak a bit to this. You know, I think that the funding for this tranche that's being approved now is going to go very quickly. And you know, there are other facilities that have been set up via the Treasury and the Fed to help you know, add liquidity to a number of the larger employers and corporations that has not gone into effect yet, as well as some of the other programs that have not fully come online. So I think, again, we're going to have to see what the success of some of these programs are, and then also, again, look at the arc of the pandemic to see exactly where we are. But I think on the Republican side, especially, there has been a bit of fatigue on the spending piece. So I think that's going to play into what it is going to look like in terms of recapitalization of PPP specifically. But I don't know if, Matt, you might have some additional insights.
Not in particularly. I mean, it's the political bargaining that's going on this front is making it really difficult to predict what's going to happen next. And I think you're absolutely right about the sort of stimulus fatigue that's going on, especially on the GOP side. Yeah, there's. I hope so. I hope we get more funding. But there's just no real way to tell at this point. I think the next couple of phases will focus on other sectors.
And one other thing before we go to the questions, What about the 2021 budget? What do you think?
The appropriations process has been ongoing. That's a lot of the work that Brownstein does with the partnership, is focusing on those top line appropriations priorities. The timeline has pushed to a bit later. So the House and the Senate are not able to, or at least have not, over the course of the last 4 or 5 weeks, been able to carry on with their normal hearings, briefings, meetings that are generally had with outside stakeholders and other constituencies have not been able to take place. So I think that the overall appropriations process has been pushed to a later, kind of a later timeline. There are some things that absolutely need to get done this year, and I think that we'll see, coming together of those packages, whether it be through continuing resolutions or a cobbling together of various appropriations bills into a type of omnibus. But I think that the most likely scenario is that we're going to see any kind of a broad, grand agreement on the appropriations front for FY21 funding is likely going to be kicked to after the election, which, even if we weren't in a situation that we're in now with the pandemic, that was likely going to be the case. And I think that even more so now that potential is becoming more and more likely.
Stephen, do you have any questions?
No, I don't have any currently. I'm curious to see what questions others on the phone may have, though.
Great. So why don't we get started? Chip, tell me the first question.
Sure. The first question is from Erica. And the question is, if we applied in the first round of the PPP and didn't hear back, will our applications be automatically in the queue for new funding, or do we have to reapply?
Mhm.
Matt, why don't you tell us what you think?
So it's a little unclear right now. I would imagine that it's up to your bank. Is sort of the short answer to that. It should still be active. You should still be in the queue, but talk to your bank. It was probably up to them whether or not they were, sort of discharge those pending applications that once the first round of funding went out, and it wasn't guaranteed to get a second round of funding, what they did with those remaining applications. So it should still be active. If nothing else, they still have your documentation. So it should still be easy to reapply, but you shouldn't have to. But again, talk to your bank.
Yeah, let me say this. I would not make any assumptions. I would absolutely talk to your bank just to verify either way, because what you don't want to do is find out that they didn't do it when it's too late. Next question, Chip.
This is from Jose in San Juan. Are there any exemptions for these programs for the territories like the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico?
Ooh.
No, the program applies to all of those territories. In addition to, if you are in the U.S., including the territories, you are eligible for this program.
Good. I know that it's been very, very tough in Puerto Rico between all the things that have been happening. And so this could really make a huge difference. And to all of our friends in Puerto Rico who are here, please know that we stand with you. And that if you read my email today about pressing pause, we are still very committed to Puerto Rico and we will be there. Next question.
We are a younger nonprofit. We've asked our bank for funding, but they coincidentally ran out of money. Is there any other alternatives if our banks don't offer loans?
So yeah, let me tell you what NMAC is doing. In the first round for us, when we found out that our bank, which is a big bank, Citibank, was not accepting applications, we started to shop around and we started to look at some of the smaller regional banks because we saw that they were able to get loans through even faster than some of the larger banks were. I think the challenge is that if you don't have a pre-existing banking relationship, setting up a banking relationship, from a distance can be difficult, but it is not impossible. We did get through to several regional banks who said that they would accept an application from us. However, Capital One ultimately did open up the queue. Now, I don't know if we're going to get it from them, but at least we are in their queue. Matt, could you talk a little bit about the set aside? The $60 million billion set aside?
Yeah, so about $60 billion, and I'm pretty sure I have that figure right, has been dedicated specifically to small lenders. So while the big banks are getting a lot of the money, there is a specific amount that is dedicated towards the smaller lenders. And like Paul was just saying, we've had a lot of our clients have had great success with some of the smaller banks, especially those that have experience with the SBA.
And so I guess that's the other thing I would say to all of you is you don't, just because your bank says no doesn't mean that you're locked out of this program, that there are many small banks. And what we did was we went to the SBA page and looked at all of the banks that are currently providing SBA PPP loans to see who was doing it and seeing the amounts. And then we contacted a couple that were in the greater Washington, D.C. region, and they were very, very friendly with us, and probably we would have gone with them if Capital One hadn't opened. Next question, please.
Okay, this is a long question, so bear with me. In the first PPP webinar, we briefly discussed that some of our agencies that have staff salaries funded by federal grants would have to be excluded in the PPP calculation. We have not found any specific verbiage that indicates this info. If it is the case, is there advocacy around allowing those funds to stay with the nonprofits that will also lose other unrestricted donor funds and will need the money in the long run?
So let me talk a little bit about this one, because after our conversation, I did speak with Dr. Merman about CDC and how they were going to be managing it. The first piece of information is talk to your project officer. Talk to your project officer as soon as possible, because they'll be able to help you figure this out. Because this is the question. You absolutely cannot double dip. You cannot both take money from the PPP program for salaries and take money from the federal government through Ryan Wright or CDC prevention funding for those salaries. However, the question is, can you redirect some of those funds so that you have the PPP covering the salaries, and then you redirect funds that you were paying for salaries for other programmatic activities? And what Dr. Merman said to us was that you really need to speak to your project officers to get clarity on this. We are going to be trying to set up a future webinar with them. And so we don't have specifics. I would apply for the full amount now, and you can always change it later. Next question. Oh, wait, Stephen, do you have a different understanding about that one?
No, that's what I understand as well, Paul.
Great. Next question.
Don't have any more questions at the moment, so.
And it's 2:45. Good. So I just want to say thank you both to the partnership and to Brownstein for putting on this webinar. I want to encourage all of you during these very difficult times that I know it is so frustrating when your bank doesn't return your calls, when your bank doesn't accept your application. And what I want you to know is that it's happening to all of us, and that it is going to be a fight. It's going to be a dogfight. And you're going to have to go out there, and you're going to have to find another bank if your bank isn't going to accept your loan application. This money is a lifeline for not just our community, but for many nonprofits across the country. And we deserve our fair share. We deserve to have this money to help support our important work. And so I encourage all of you to apply. And thank you so very much for joining us. And we will talk next week. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.